I have just loved missions and the idea of missions my entire life. And I started having kids really young, and so didn't really have the opportunity to go. Now that my kids are older, my daughter came to me and said, "Mom, I think it's time for you to start going on mission trips." And I was like, you know what? I think you're right. So I went on the mission trip to Honduras. We were the second group to go to the Promised Home. We got to do a lot of street evangelism. We did services at churches at night, got to pray for people. The journey I'm on with missions right now, I think it started at Jubilee last year when we were encouraged that God had financial provision for us. And I was like, you know what, God, I want to be one of those stories of financial breakthrough. That's what I want this next year. At that time, I had 2 full-time jobs, one that paid really well and one that didn't pay as well. And so I was like, you know what, I've got this money. I'll probably start buying some rental property. That was in my mind as I'm going to do all these things in this next year. And a couple of months later, God started prompting me to quit my job, the one that paid really well. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not God. And because that doesn't line up with what he's asking me to do in my mind. But I kept getting prophetic words from people saying, you know, there's change coming, I see you. And it was all related to missions. And I was like, okay, I love that, but I gotta have money to do this. So I can't quit my job. So I went on for several months and I was miserable. I just kept saying, God, are you sure about this? My last confirmation, I went and met with Pastor Zach and was like, listen, I feel like God is telling me over and over and over for months that I need to quit this job. And it doesn't make sense to me. And he just looked at me and he said, are you thinking about missions? And I was like, okay, there's my confirmation because I hadn't talked to him about it at all. God kept telling me, I want to be your provider. I want you to trust me to be your provider. And I was like, well, you know, I'm doing okay on my own. So and he was like, no, I'm asking you to trust me. So I finally turned in my resignation. And from that moment, it's just been amazing. It's just been this constant God meeting our financial needs and providing more than enough through this whole several months that it's been now, that it's just been overwhelming. And most recently, I just had a girl come up to me at church and she said, I have this money and God, I've been wanting to put it in offering, and God's like, hold it. And God said, that's you give it to. And she said, I literally broke down sobbing. And so she's like, I'm sewing into you every month now for missions. And I was like, okay. So I've just been really humbled and overwhelmed by how God is providing, and it doesn't look like what I thought it would. It's a much more uncomfortable way for me to allow him to provide, because I thought I was going to have just, like all this business stuff going on. But instead it looks like just trusting him and believing that it's not my power, it's not what I can do that's going to bring that financial breakthrough and spread the love of Jesus. It's through what he promised me and his faithfulness. I actually made some good friends on the Honduras trip, and I love that God brings people together and creates connections on these trips. I met the Pruitts from the Stillwater campus. They work with Promised Home also in Kenya. And so my plan is hopefully in January to go to Kenya with them and really look at the medical needs of Promised Home, as well as do the mission work in the community. I'm just really excited about that being in my heart for so long and being kind of dormant for all of those years. And then God bringing that back to my remembrance of, this is something that I created you for.